It is about a year now since the pandemic hit Europe with full force. And unfortunately, far too many politicians have already jumped to the view that for Europe to become resilient and better prepared for the next emergency, it should become less dependent on foreign suppliers of goods, services and technologies. Some of them say that globalization has gone too far. Others think that Europe needs to build up its own capacity to produce more medical goods so that we don't need to depend on imports from abroad. They are wrong. I am Johan Norberg, and I'm going to share with you some of the key points in my new paper, Covid-19 and the Danger of Self-sufficiency, how Europe's pandemic resilience was helped by an open economy. First, just as Europe became the epicenter of the pandemic, EU countries closed borders, and some even shut down the export of medical goods to other EU countries. For a while, it looked as if there was a war of all against all. Look, for instance, at this chart, showing the import of protective garments from other EU countries, the orange line, and from countries outside the EU, the purple line. EU imports from within the European Union had been growing steadily over time, but then in March 2020 it fell rapidly by 25%. For a while it was each European nation for itself. However, EU imports from abroad, which had been pretty stable over several years, increased incredibly by 44% and helped hospitals and their staff to get access to PPE. Europe's shortage of protective garment was seriously reduced by our global imports. That we were helped by our global supply becomes even clearer if we look at disinfectants. Yes, hand sanitizers, your favorite alcohol in the past year. Europe's imports from abroad, shown in the purple line, grew by almost 4 times last spring. That is 278%. Imports within Europe, the orange line, also grew, but not at all as sharply as our imports from outside the EU. The same is true for our supply of gas masks. Look at this chart. Both imports from the EU and the rest of the world increased. But imports from outside Europe, the purple line, really spiked. It increased by 430%. And the change in imports of single-use medical gowns, wow, it was even bigger. It went from 18 million euros in March 2020 to 341 million euros in June, a change of more than 1,700%. My point is simple. Europeans are dependent on supplies from other parts of the world, just as other parts of the world are dependent on supplies from Europe. And that's a good thing, because it makes us more resilient. If we in Europe would have governments directing us to produce all the things that we may need in the event of an emergency, we would actually make ourselves more vulnerable. It is diversification, not concentration of production, that will make Europe more resilient when the next emergency hits. The best policy for resilience is one that encourages specialization and innovation, and when the emergency hits, allow for people to improvise in search for solutions. For that to happen, we need openness to goods, services and technologies from abroad. If you want to read more, my paper, Covid-19 and the Danger of Self-sufficiency, can be accessed on ESIP's website.